This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Masters are ripping and tearing barriers to entry for anyone to create an online presence to fuel their passion project. Welcome to the community's ranking of the Doom Eternal boss difficulty. I called upon you to vote and nearly 2,600 Doom Slayers answered the call. If you're new to this style of ranking, I poll the viewers on a 1 to 10 scale for boss difficulty, then create a conversational ranking by sharing your comments. And there were plenty to go around. Comparing the Doom 2016 to Eternal ranking, there's a staggering disparity in interaction, not to mention the lowest like to dislike ratio I've had in nearly a year. Whenever that happens, I do my best to find the source of the disconnect. I encourage disagreement. After all, the videos I make from my own perspective can only be from a single viewpoint, one that won't align with many of yours. It's for that reason I love doing community-based content. Sharing your thoughts in addition to my own adds greater context to the overall spectrum of opinions for a particular topic. And I'm a firm believer that making a faithful effort to understand perspectives you may not agree with is valuable. So while I'll be providing the community's difficulty score and digging into that aspect of each boss, consider this video an opportunity for me to continue the dialogue surrounding all of our thoughts on Doom Eternal's boss quality. Without further ado, here is your ranking of the Doom Eternal bosses from easiest to hardest. Number 5, Doom Hunters. If there's any boss that seems universally agreed upon as the easiest experience, it's the Doom Hunters. Coming in just below the average difficulty as a boss, and even lower in the enemy rotation, their fight just doesn't offer the level of challenge the other bosses provide. When compared to other early game battles, it can seem more challenging on the surface at least. At first, it seems like it's gonna be a chaotic fight, until you realize a well-placed blood punch practically destroys their legs, and from then on, it's easy pickings. Can we take a minute to appreciate that there exists a tool in your arsenal that lets you punch so hard, it's enough to destroy the tail end of this demonic war mermaid? Scouring the comments, the silence on the Hunters spoke volume in terms of notable difficulty and interest level. In reference to the latter, the handful of comments I could find reinforced how lackluster they are as a boss, and it's hard to disagree. Whenever I give the game a second playthrough, I have a feeling they'll grow even easier with an endgame level of player skill. In the enemy rotation, their damage output is about the only thing you need to worry about. But at the point you're playing on a higher difficulty, surely you've mastered the movement and weapon cycling to the point you can melt them in seconds with the right timing and strategy. For the record, I'm fully aware Doom Eternal expects you to manage your resources on the fly between weapon cycling, using appropriate mods, the flame belt, dashes, glory kills, chainsaw ammo refills, etc. In the early part of the game, while I was still finding my footing, I did question how fun the emphasis on resource management was, but eventually found it to be an excellent evolution of 2016's formula. Doom Eternal is not 2016, it's a different game with its own goals. The dance they created is balanced phenomenally well between the diverse roster of enemies and the many dedicated tools you have to counter their strengths. My initial disappointment in Eternal's bosses comes from my own expectations that they would follow in 2016's footsteps. Over the course of my playthrough, I abandoned these self-imposed constraints and accepted the bosses for what they are. Given the Doom Hunters a second look, they aren't as bad as I initially thought. They are easy, the mobs that accompany them are simple, but there's a clever underlying design choice. It's an early game fight that is helping ease you into the game's mechanics, a feeling I alluded to in my ranking. It was the first moment the Doom dance really clicked for me. Their purpose as a stepping stone may not make them the most challenging or memorable as a boss, but despite amounting to punching bags that become even hardier fist repositories as you adapt to Eternal's ideal playstyle, they do hold a valuable place in the initial experience. Number 4, Con Maker. In terms of disparity, Con Maker was by far the most erratic in terms of scoring. With loads of votes on the high and low end of the spectrum, she evened out with a grade just above the difficulty average. She was so impossible for me to beat. Con Maker was a joke if you use the Unmaker like a smart human. Con Maker was just an unfair boss. Con Maker was a joke, honestly. All you have to do is use the lock-on rocket launcher mod and she's staggered in 3 to 6 bursts. Pair that with the drones being an infinite ammo supply and you have the biggest joke of the game. Reading through the comments and taking an honest look at my own experience, I think I can boil success down to 2 things. How good are you at high mobility offense, and what weapons did you use? If you're excellent at the full extent of Eternal's movement capabilities, you can negate what many, including myself, found to be the most challenging part of her fight. The floor is lava. Even if you weren't the best at positioning, the second factor is even more critical. Your weapon choice can alter the margin for error dramatically. If you start out like I did, opting for the noob tube and its paltry damage, you'll find yourself subject to far more of her and the arena's mob's attacks. Using something that shreds her and takes the guesswork out of aim like the lock-on rocket is a game changer. Not only does a lock-on allow you to concentrate more on your positioning, it makes short work of her shield. If you don't take the hint to use powerful weapons like this to downplay the regenerating shield and the demand this creates when not handled efficiently, it can make this battle far harder than it needs to be. Thing is, I have to admit by that point, you should be well immersed in the strengths and weaknesses of every tool in your arsenal, so deferring to the grenade launcher as my finest form of offense was foolish to say the least. It didn't help that I missed out on a handful of health, armor, and demo upgrades, and was missing out on a handful of weapon mods like the lock-on rocket, Arbalest Ballista, or shielded minigun. All of these can retcon shield in record time and would have made the experience a lot less daunting. The game gives you every opportunity to seek out these tools though, so it's entirely my fault for missing out on them. Even without the ability to meld her quickly, I have to admit that my mobility was not up to par with what I've seen from other players. All personal problems, but with these factors in mind, I hope my initial experience at least makes more sense. This experience makes it easy for me to understand how the many different things you need to juggle can be troublesome for those who aren't prepared to deal with the expectations her fight demands. In contrast, 2020 hindsight allows me to completely understand why so many found her easy. If you identify the right tools for the job and have excellent mobility, you'll be fisting your way to victory without much strain. With this coming in the final stretch, a point by which you should be well versed in the Doom dance, I agree with the portion of the community arguing these expectations are fair, balanced, and easier than I made them out to be in my initial ranking. I'm confident that those in the comments that found her tough initially like I did would find the experience much different with the right tools and some practice. I'll retract my earlier statement that the lava should be nerfed on the basis it's intended to punish players who haven't adapted to the high mobility Eternal demands by the second to last level. The enemies offering loads of ammo, her relatively passive attacks, the ability to melt her with sensible strategies, and an arena offering layers to avoid her lava all add up to a well-designed yet divisive experience that I expect more will find enjoyable and easy as we all improve as Doomslayers. But if you're looking for a place to launch your passion project in your demon slaying downtime, Squarespace is an excellent place to start. Their robust website creation kit offers boundless tools to make your website hotter than a Marauder doggo on your tail. You can play videos in the background, add some extra flair, make use of their masterful search engine optimization features to permeate the legendary front page of Google, and you'll get valuable performance analytics to track your progress. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. Once you're ready to launch, use my unique URL in the description to save 10% on securing your masterpiece. Big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and thank you for listening. Number 3, the Gladiator. Despite the Gladiator squeaking out a narrow 100th decimal victory over Con Maker, the few comments related to his difficulty lean toward the higher end. I had the most trouble with the Gladiator, to be honest. Despite having the Green Eyes telegraph, I think the rest of his attacks that lack that telegraph are very hard to avoid due to their high speed. This is exacerbated in the second phase as his aggression rises, amplified further by the heavy demons he spawns that multiplies your focus. It's pretty challenging to balance damaging the boss, replenishing your resources, and handling the demons attacking you. This is even further intensified by the small arena, limiting maneuverability. Love the boss, but this balance makes it tough to pay him proper attention. Well said, Snappy, and I agree wholeheartedly. The Green Eyes telegraph is generous, and the resulting glory stun from a proper punish is helpful, but his other attacks can be quick and troublesome, especially in the face of the chaos surrounding you. The arena is one of the few in the game that doesn't support multiple layers for verticality, which benefits a scope of focusing straight on to the boss battle, but is contradicted by everything else pulling your attention away. It's the reason I found it hard to give him the highest marks in the quality ranking. I like him quite a bit, but his demanding quick attacks in flat arena felt geared more toward a one-on-one battle. I don't think there's anything wrong with Doom Eternal's emphasis on adding enemies to boss fights and using them as living ammo caches, but you need to support the player's inability to target everything at once. His high aggression in a flat arena makes this difficult, and that's a weakness in his design. At the same time, his mechanics feel geared entirely toward pulling your focus toward him, so an arena like the Doom Hunters where you could run away would feel a bit silly. To his credit, you are rewarded for punishing him during his attacks in the second phase, because with great precision, the resulting stagger will replenish the majority of your health. He does offer built-in ways to keep your health topped off, but on the higher difficulties, 1 or 2 mistakes can get you killed. Some of his non-telegraphed attacks feel nearly undodgeable. I think these comments further emphasize that the game encourages you to keep the pressure on him regularly with your own offense, which will downplay some of his more aggressive attacks by replenishing your resources. Diverting your attention makes this hard to do, especially without a vertical arena with cover, adding difficulty to the fight. As indicated by the numerical score, I don't think it's anything most of you found to be impossibly difficult, but it is a moderate challenge that is amplified by a clash between Doom Eternal's gameplay philosophy and his demanding design. Forgive me for the brief tangent before our next entry, but since I bothered to include it in the quality ranking Gladiator section, it's worth mentioning my critique of Eternal's story. This put many commenters on the defensive, and I have a pretty good idea why. Despite trying to preemptively avoid such criticism by saying, I didn't feel like that was an answer I personally needed, but if you enjoyed reading the codex and immersing yourself in the lore, more power to you. I'm merely explaining why I won't be discussing boss lore or handing out brownie points for its inclusion in Eternal. That doesn't give me a free pass to say whatever I want haphazardly. I like making an effort to blend in overarching game review elements into boss rankings as it makes sense naturally. This was not natural. I don't think anyone was gonna chastise me for not digging deep into the boss lore, but since I drew attention to my negative perspective on the story without giving substantial context as to why I felt that way, I created out-of-place criticisms that felt tone-deaf and unreasonable. Personally, I wish they did a better job at getting me invested through the narrative without needing to do supplementary reading, and I do think that is a legitimate weakness in their storytelling. But I still got what I wanted from the experience: a near constant drip of bombastic action and memorable moments that admittedly had added gravity thanks to their purpose and what I could discern of the narrative. I'm glad those of you who enjoy the lore got what you wanted, and while my own criticisms are relevant and fair to making a video based on my opinion, it's my responsibility to make sure they have purpose balanced with context. Though this was a point of contention in the previous video, without a doubt, our next boss was the biggest source of chaos. Number 2, the Marauder. A solid leap forward in difficulty, especially when it comes to his place in the enemy rotation. Before we reflect on my thoughts, let's hear from you. Marauder was the only boss I had to decrease the difficulty on. He widened my asshole by 3 inches. Relatable. The Marauder was hard when I first fought him, but every subsequent time I gained experience with his moveset, it got easier and easier. Never too easy, but bearable. I can appreciate the difference in his design and how he links to the Slayer, but man, the shield, the dog. The dog is the worst part, other than that the boss is easy. Marauder isn't hard for me, it's just that dang bloodhound that keeps putting his teeth on my screen. The real travesty in gaming is that dogs keep being represented with nightmarish design like the teleporting troglodytes in Dark Souls 3. If this enemy was in Dark Souls, people would be praising it. I think people did not accept mindless doom to end up kicking their teeth in. As for the dog, I love it. It keeps you on your toes and forces you to change your strategy. I don't know that I would ever refer to Doom as mindless, but I would agree Eternal is more demanding than its predecessor. Clearly, opinions range from being booty-bustingly difficult to a joke hoisted slightly higher by its carnivorous canine. But since you brought up the Dark Souls of Dark Souls games, allow me to make that comparison to Eternal. Because, coincidentally, Dark Souls features a very similar boss that shows up later in the enemy rotation.
Hello there.
Both are accompanied by glass cannon doggos that shred you, but collapse if you even look at them funny. Both pitch you against a speedy boss with high damage output that demands high skill evasion. One with a shoebox arena that limits your maneuverability, the other with a shield to eliminate the majority of your offensive options. Capra Demon is widely considered to be a bad boss. The dogs ambushing you alongside the boss creates the possibility of getting melted the moment you enter the arena. Though the stairs offer disorderly ways to isolate them for a split second, it's still a chaotic Benny Hill chase. If you can narrow it down to a one-on-one battle, the closed-in walls make your ability to dodge perfectly vital at an early point in the game where players are unlikely to be that skilled. This all combines to create a hard boss, but one that isn't necessarily fun. Difficulty doesn't automatically equal quality. The remarkable thing about Dark Souls is how often it puts forward high difficulty while feeling fair through great design, which is rewarding. That is to say, like all aspects of boss design, difficulty needs to be balanced well to be enjoyable. The Marauder goes against everything you learn throughout the game and makes you take it slow and dodge attacks. Whether that makes it a good or bad challenge is up to you. This describes my general frustration with the Marauder. There's nothing wrong with going against the grain. I regularly encourage it when I say in rankings that many bosses benefit from being unique deviations from the gameplay loop. But if you take that step, you still need to maintain the fun factor. I found the Marauder fight to be extremely fun. It was the first time I was introduced to an enemy as fast as I was, and that forced me to change pace in a good way. Instead of the typical shoot, scoot, loot, dance, I was reacting to each of his movements with 3 of my own. My offensive gambits and focus toward him was only interrupted by breathers to grab resources. It felt like a deadly dance between two beings that far surpassed even the greatest of demons. Fighting the Marauder is the exact opposite of fun. As you can see, it really depends on the player. Both hold valid opinions, though I do applaud Epic's Soul Eater for going the extra mile with a well-written analysis on why they personally found it so entertaining. If there's anything I would go back and change about my own Marauder commentary, it would be its imbalance. I spent a long time justifying what I didn't like, but spent little time discussing what I did. The Marauder's regular appearance at the end of enemy encounters gave this crescendo-like feeling to each battle he was in. That's a sentiment I wholeheartedly agree with. Like the Doom Hunters easing you into the Doom dance under slightly higher expectations than anything you've fought so far, the Marauder enters at the perfect time to change the tempo and keep the beat fresh. Though he does demand a high level of attention, that resulting scramble to KO everything outside of the lesser demons while tangling on his terms is an absolute rush. His design has a clear purpose on the developer's chessboard, though I personally feel his design is skewed toward the slightly imbalanced with minuscule openings, oversized damage for his speed, and a very unnecessary assist from the dog. That doesn't mean he's absent of value, both to me on a small scale and clearly to a large portion of you in a more grandiose manner. That said, if your immediate reaction to opinions that differ from your own is negative, I encourage you to keep an open mind. Comments like, "I never thought I'd see the day when a YouTuber whined this much about the Marauder, time to get good," suggest my opinion doesn't have value because I struggle with something you didn't. It's worth mentioning that not liking an aspect of a boss's design doesn't equal an inability to defeat them. For what it's worth, I died only a single time to the boss Marauder, then no more than a handful to the rest in the game. That's without using the now common Ballista Super Shotgun Ballista combo that I didn't hear about until I'd already finished my blind playthrough on the second day of release. A combo that does provide a notable knock to his difficulty. In spite of this, the Marauder soared up on the list because the demands he puts on the player are notably high. In fact, his enemy score is the highest on today's list, which is understandable considering the pressure he exerts anytime he enters the arena. It's nothing mind-blowingly difficult, but it is significant enough to make it a close race to the top spot. A spot that is occupied by the Titanic icon in the game's finale. The Icon of Sin was by far one of the best bosses I've faced. The absolute horror of fighting this huge demon made me shiver in excitement. On top of all the ammo pickups for your sword and chainsaw, makes you feel like a true Doomslayer until the end. The Icon of Sin does what the Gladiator fails to do. Unlike the Gladiator, he provides a layered arena with resources out the wazoo to take on the many demons surrounding him. Crucible ammo, armor, and health packs, tons of basic mobs to saw for ammo, with portals and jump pads spread throughout for strategic evasion opportunities. At its core, however, he still commands attention like all of the other bosses, both through devastating attacks and a girthy dual-sided reservoir of HP. For the record, that's what I love about him. Referencing it not being a mano-a-mano battle isn't an insult, it's a compliment to how well balanced the entire thing felt. The difficulty was spot on. Challenging, but not so much that it felt oppressive. His damage was significant, but his attacks are generally well telegraphed as long as you keep an eye on him. Your attention will be pulled in many different directions like most battles, but the arena's plentiful resources give a reasonable way to solve that problem quickly. It is quite taxing, especially due to the length of the battle, but I found it to be the perfect blend of the standard gameplay loop in a boss fight, which seemed to be what Eternal was going for. On Ultraviolence, the Icon was by far the hardest boss I faced. I died to his first phase way more than I ever did to any Marauder, and as I became more familiar with the elements of the fight, it became an insane balancing act of finding offensive openings, dashing like a madman to dodge his brutal slams, and pushing into the front of the arena for those sweet, sweet ammo pinatas, all while having to efficiently handle heavy demons with the Crucible. This balancing act creates a razor-thin margin of error. Megatron goes on to say he beat the second phase in one go, and I have a feeling why. The first arena has a more closed-off design that makes it harder to keep an eye on the Icon at all times. The back end is a few rooms on top of each other with small openings, whereas the front gives you a clear view. The second arena is much more open, with the lower part of the arena offering safe haven through rooftops instead of blocking your vision through walls. To further expand on the margin for error, it's increased dramatically by a battle that for some boiled down to a long slog of run around and shoot the huge thing. It's another interesting example of how these elements can combine to create a beautiful chorus of game mechanics perfectly encapsulated with a boss at the center for some, while for others it can be an absolute mess of mechanics resulting in a dull and tedious fight that is the worst. Whether or not we agree on what the hardest, easiest, best, or worst Doom Eternal bosses are, I hope you enjoyed my spin of the community's aggregated take on these aspects of the game. Split's comment likely sums things up for many of us. I've been playing this game non-stop ever since launch. I just love it so much. Though Doom Eternal's bosses were hit and miss for me both in terms of quality and difficulty, I had a blast with the game overall, and I hope you did as well. I appreciate every one of you that took the time to vote and leave a comment. It was great fun doing a community ranking after so long, so I look forward to doing more. Until then, I want to thank you for watching today, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.